my gosh, I am so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be on the air. And y'all, it feels so good to be back after a 4-month break from podcasting. But let me tell you, it feels way longer than that. But I want to officially introduce the That's So Rich podcast to you, which was formerly known as the No Bullshit Manifestation Show. And we're going to be breaking down inside of this podcast episode why there is a rebrand, where I went, as well as my full story of going from rock bottom to manifesting and living the life of my dreams so that you can really get an idea of the kind of richness that we're going to be talking about inside of this podcast, whether you be a returning listener or this is your first time ever listening to the show. But without further ado, let's get into this. What's up, and welcome to the That's So Rich podcast, the show that's redefining wealth and helping you manifest a life that is rich in every single way. I'm your host, Kat Kozad, transformation coach, manifestation expert, and spiritual guide. And together, we're going to create your happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest life. I'm so happy you're here. Let's do this thing. Hello, my friends. Hello to all of my loyal listeners. And hello if this is your first time ever tuning in. I am so excited to be back, like I've already said, but I just want to thank you all for the endless support and the messages that I received in the time that I took a break from podcasting this year. I literally received dozens and dozens of messages from y'all over on Instagram being like, Kat, where are you? Where did you go? Are you okay? Do you need anything? And just hoping that I was going to be back on the air. And y'all, I always was going to be back on the air. I just need to take a moment to step back and kind of readjust before continuing to move forward. So like I said at the very beginning, I'm going to talk about where I went, what's happened since, and then also just reintroduce myself, because if you have followed along with the No Bullshit Manifestation Show, you know a lot of my story. But if this is brand new to you, if you're tuning into the That's So Rich podcast for the first time ever, I have one hell of a story of how I went from just a really challenging upbringing to rock bottom moment to now living my dream life here in New York City. And it's my life's work and my life's purpose to help other people along the way do the same thing for themselves. So where did I go? Where did I go? Honestly, I've just been here in New York. I, in 2021, 2022, and 2023, did a ton of traveling. And while I moved to New York City in 2021, I hadn't really spent a ton of time just actually laying roots down and becoming a part of the community here in New York. And so I've just been really deeply connecting to my community here in New York. I've genuinely never been happier in my entire life, but through this happiness, I've realized that there were so many things that I was avoiding in the past, or I was just kind of like brushing past, because I had created the success that I had created. I had seen so much growth within my business. I had all of y'all just like such a cool community online, and wanted to make sure that I was delivering as much to you as I possibly could. And I came to this realization that since starting the podcast and since starting my business, I hadn't really changed a ton of things, because I had loved all of it for such a long time. But suddenly it started to feel kind of like my old favorite outfit. And I'm sure all of us can relate to that. There's that one outfit that you have from the past, or that you used to wear over and over and over again because it made you feel like the baddest bitch in the world. It made you feel so fucking good in your skin. And then you wear it, and suddenly you're like, oh, weird. That used to be my favorite outfit. I don't know why I don't love it the same way as I used to. And it's not that I don't love it at all. It's just that I don't really want to wear it anymore. It doesn't really feel like me. I feel like I've outgrown it. I feel like I'm a new version of myself since putting that outfit on in the past. And that's exactly how I started to feel about different aspects of my business, because when I started my business back in January 2020, I was a completely different person than who I am today. And while there had been quite a few things that I had changed behind the scenes for my clients, there wasn't a ton actually like outward facing. And so this feels like the new outfit. I have revamped all of my programs. I am back on all of my platforms. I feel more excited, more in tune with myself and with the vision than I ever have before. And I truly feel like better than ever before. And I'm so excited to come back with that. But it was a really interesting process, actually admitting to myself that the things that I was doing didn't fully feel like me anymore. And it was never that the content behind it wasn't super powerful or that I wasn't impacting other people's lives or that I wasn't so grateful to show up and help other people create transformation in their lives and their manifestations as well. But it really just felt as though I needed this whole entire revamp and energy reset. And so the past 4 months have really been about that. Honestly, the past year and a half has been about that. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of a Saturn return before. I still don't fully get it because I would be an absolute liar if I told you that I know lots of things about astrology. I don't. But I do know that I am currently in my Saturn return, and it is so crazy. The other day, I just got like this super like quick intuitive hit of like, Kat, look up when your Saturn return started. And it literally started in March of 2023 midst me having like a mental fucking breakdown. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, wow, if only I would have known. But it's okay. It's been really cool to come back home to myself. And what I do know of a Saturn return is essentially whatever your Saturn in your star chart is returning to, the sign that is in, which mine is Pisces. Whenever it's returning back to that original placement is about 29, 30 years from when you were born, and you essentially go through a rebirth. So your girl has been going through a rebirth. But with all of this being said, as I continue to be reborn, I actually want to share my story of who I am, why I'm here, and what got me here in the first place, because it has been so wild, honestly, for myself to look back to the years that have happened since I started my intentional manifestation and healing journey. And honestly, before that, because it no longer feels like my life, but I know that that's the truth for so many of us when we start this journey, is who you are when you start is not going to be who you are when you manifest what it is that you want, or you create the life of your dreams, or you land the dream job, partner, whatever it may be. And I am so proud of where I've come from, because on paper, where I am today, living in New York City, owning a multiple six-figure company, impacting hundreds of people in my programs and thousands of people through my platforms every single year, and just like living the life that I have today, it doesn't make sense on paper because of where I came from. And that's the beautiful thing about intentional manifestation and about healing and about really just finding the richness in life, is that you have the power to have, be, and do whatever it is that you desire if you really allow yourself to lean into it. So with that being said, I'm going to share my story, because the last time I gave you my full story was back in 2021 when I first moved to New York, and we love that version of me, but we don't know her anymore. But I do want to preface that with me sharing my story, it does come along with quite a few trigger warnings. I talk about an eating disorder, potentially we'll talk about sexual assault and rape, and then also we'll talk about suicidal ideation. So if those topics are triggering to you, if those topics feel as though they're something that you cannot or do not want to deal with right now, feel free to breeze on past this episode and on to another one, because there are many of them to dive into. But without a further ado, this is my story. So my name is Kat Kozad. My full name is Katrina, and I was named after the band Katrina and the Waves, who sang that one-hit wonder song, I'm Walking on the Sunshine. I'm walking on sunshine, ooh. We all know the one. But I'm originally from a tiny rural town in Colorado, and it's absolutely beautiful there. But growing up, my soul never felt quite at home there. And I didn't really get that because growing up, I always knew that I was meant for more, but I often felt like, what is this? What does this mean? Why do I feel this energy inside of myself? Why do I feel this connection to something bigger? Because that was not something that anybody around me was experiencing. And I also grew up in a household where there was intense alcohol abuse. My mom wasn't a citizen of the United States, so in order to stay here and raise me and my brother, she had to tolerate a lot of toxic things with my dad. And the two of them had quite a dysfunctional relationship most of the time. I want to preface that with the fact that there were also so many beautiful moments during childhood. And I think that those are often not talked about enough in the world of personal development, healing, manifestation, so on and so forth. And while my childhood as a whole definitely was kind of challenging, I also recognized there was so much richness, there was so much love, there was just a lot of unhealed wounds, and there was a lot of things that my parents and then me and my brother experienced that were challenging, and we didn't know how to navigate at the time because we were all just doing the best that we could. But with that, I, at the time, didn't realize it, but this dynamic in the household really led me to feeling unsafe inside of my body and just in general didn't feel that sense of safety, which manifested as me gaining a lot of weight. And quick side note on that, when you feel unsafe, a lot of the time you will gain weight as a protection mechanism or barrier between you and the world because your subconscious mind does this to help you quote unquote stay safe. So if you are experiencing weight that you're like, what the hell, why can't I get this off? I've tried everything. A lot of the times digging into the healing work, the inner work is the key to that because there's something inside of you that's saying that you're unsafe. And there's so many different things on creating internal safety that I can help you with. I actually just released today a course on creating internal safety inside of my membership community, which is called the Mindset and Manifestation Inner Circle. And if you're wanting to dive into that, as well as the tons of other resources and live calls that we have inside of the Mindset and Manifestation Inner Circle, you can click the link down below in the show notes to join us. It is so valuable and there's no long-term commitment to it. So if you're ever wanting to join just to try it out or just to check out the monthly course on creating internal safety, you can do that. And if you ever want to cancel in the future, you also can. My goal is to make it so valuable that you won't want to, but there is the link to it down below in the show notes for you to check out and come create safety with us because creating internal safety is actually one of the most important parts of the manifestation journey. So with that being said, I gained a lot of weight. And because I gained all of that weight, I then was severely bullied for it, the kind of bullied where I was actually physically harmed and put at risk because oftentimes guys at school, especially older guys, were awful to me. They called me a beached whale. My brother's friends would corner me with BB guns and shoot me because they told me that I was too slow to run away. And then I was even held at knife point by a guy in my hometown because he just had such a problem with my appearance and with the weight that I had. So because of these different experiences and the trauma that I experienced from them, I started to try and change myself to be something that wouldn't be so triggering to other people. And I honestly turned into a bit of a chameleon and just hung out with people that I thought could really help me mask and not feel like I was such a target. And I ended up hanging out with the girls who were considered popular in my grade. And for the most part, they were incredibly lovely. They were beautiful girls. I think they're all doing incredible things in the world today. And I really enjoyed a lot of the experiences that I got to have with them, but I never felt like I truly belonged in their friend group. I never felt like I actually was supposed to be there. But like I mentioned earlier, I always felt this little light inside of me, this little knowing that I was made for more, I was made for something different. But I often dismissed that because I wanted to try and fit in with everybody else. because, like I said, it was so scary to be me during those younger years. It felt like anytime I tried to be me, it was bad, it was wrong, it was negative, it was something that I was going to be bullied for, there was going to be a lack of safety surrounding it. And again, I didn't realize this at the time. This is all in retrospect. During the time, I was just like, okay, this is normal. This is what I go through. And that's what I want to say for all of you as well. It's like looking back on your childhood experiences, you probably have those moments as well where you're like, why the fuck didn't I realize it at the time? And it's like, because it felt normal. Because all of this was normal to us when we were going through it, but now you have the opportunity to heal it. And so with that, I gave up a lot of the things that I actually liked. Like, I was a theater kid, I was a choir girl, but I traded theater in for sports because that's what my friends did. And through my school years, I honestly hated it so fucking much. I cheated in almost every single one of my classes, but I still managed to graduate with a 3.89 GPA or something like that, which I actually find hilarious. And I'm sorry to any and all of my teachers if you listen to this or if you ever find out about it. I literally lied to you all the time. But in the spring of my sophomore year of high school, I had been pushing trauma down and I had been pushing my emotions down for so long that I finally hit my first breaking point. And at this breaking point, I started experiencing suicidal thoughts for the very first time, and it scared the living shit out of me because I didn't want to die, but I also felt so scared and so overwhelmed that life was never going to get any better, and it felt like I couldn't control my mind. And so this was the first time that I was ever introduced to any form of mindfulness, meditation, therapy, tools like that. And it was through actually going to therapy, and it definitely was such a lifesaver at the time. But ultimately, it kind of just felt like I was putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. So after that, I would continue to just kind of put Band-Aids over things. I was still experiencing so much pain, but I often was trying to find ways to numb out from it. And so I started using drugs and alcohol to numb out from it and to really push away the anxiety and fear that I was often experiencing. And I partied so hard. When people meet me now, because I'm sober now, they're like, oh my gosh, you're sober. That's amazing. Did you ever used to drink? And I'm like, yeah. I was crazy. And it was actually fun for a very, very short period of time. But eventually it became something that was no longer fun. It became something that was actually really harmful and not supportive to my life in any way, shape, or form. But rewinding just a moment, so I ended up taking a gap year after high school and then eventually went to university, even though I didn't want to. I had so many people telling me that it would be a waste of who I was and my smarts if I didn't get a degree. And so I ended up going to the university in my hometown. And I went to school for a semester before I got into my first serious relationship, got my heart broken, and couldn't deal with the pain of that and stopped going to class, started partying even harder, and ended up dropping out. And after I dropped out, I ended up moving to Denver, Colorado, and I worked in restaurants. And I really loved working in restaurants at the get-go, but I also knew that it wasn't what I was meant to be doing. I just thought it was the only job that I could get due to the fact that I dropped out of college. And this period of my life, I would say from age 20 to age 23, 19 to 23, was my wild years, the holy shit cat is insane years. My friends oftentimes look back at that version of me and they're like, one, we don't know her anymore, but two, oh my God, did we used to worry about her, but also know that you were going to be okay at the end of the day. But like I said, some of the moments that I had were really fun, but most of the time I was actually just trying to numb out and escape myself. I had little to no self-worth. I didn't believe in myself. I deeply, deeply struggled mentally. I was constantly battling with myself in my head. And it was around this time that I was introduced to manifestation for the very first time, but I thought it was a bunch of bullshit. ultimately because it scared me. Because if I was to take that look into manifestation, and if I was to start to understand the power of energy and so on and so forth, I knew that I was going to have to take responsibility for my life and what it looked like, as opposed to at the time I was just in such a deep victim mentality. But what did start to change around that time is that I slowly started to develop a relationship to the universe, because I did feel deeply connected to a higher power, but I didn't understand it in any way, shape, or form, because growing up in my house, we did not talk about religion. We did not talk about spirituality. We did not talk about any of it, because my dad is actually the son of a pastor and really like revolted religion at a young age. Meanwhile, my mom grew up Catholic and had like a lot of the intense Catholic guilt that comes along with some people who studied or were a part of Catholicism growing up. And so like religion always felt super funky to me, even though I did have this like deep sense of like, okay, I am connected to something, I just don't know what it is. And so as I started to develop this relationship to the universe, I started to try to change my life. But ultimately, I was doing it through trying to change external things. So I was moving from apartment to apartment. I ended up taking out $30,000 to go to an immersive coding program, and I have never coded a day in my life since. And ultimately, during that time, I just battled with spells of hopelessness and depression at least once a year, where I was so scared that I was going to take my own life. And ultimately, in the spring of 2019, I was given the opportunity to move across state lines to help a friend open a restaurant. And I took her up on this opportunity because I was convinced that this was going to be my fresh start and the moment where I could truly turn my life around and create the life that I wanted. So I packed up all of my stuff in Denver and left my friends, my apartment, my job, everything that I had to go pursue this opportunity, only to very soon realize that all of the things that I was trying to run away from were actually going to follow me, because all of the things that I was trying to run away from actually lived within me. And those things started to become amplified because I was completely out of my comfort zone in a brand new state and environment, and I was so scared. I remember I've done a lot of reflection recently. I like to go back into my camera roll and look at how life was and what I was going through and all of these different things. And I actually, when I was back home in Colorado over the summer, I opened up one of my old journals, and every single line in that journal, I shit you not, says my faith is greater than my fears, because I was so scared that all I could do was like write this repetitively on a loop to try and convince myself that I was going to be okay, as well as just like try to fight the demons that were hanging out in my mind. But during this time, I was so scared that I actually started to pray for the first time. And I didn't know what I was praying to. I didn't know if it was the universe. I didn't know if it was God. I didn't know if it was to anything else other than that. But I started praying and I started asking for whatever was out there to save me, because I was so scared. And fast forward to my rock bottom moment. So I started praying probably around April of 2019. That's when a really, really intense bout of hopelessness started to come into me. And I, in June of 2019, hit my rock bottom moment where I was $70,000 in debt, working 60 plus hours a week, oftentimes in a dead-end job that I really didn't enjoy, living paycheck to paycheck. And truly, I had never been more sad, more lost, more broke in my entire life. And I didn't know how life can continue to move forward. And I, at that point, didn't know if I could continue to move forward, if it was going to continue to look that way. And then one morning after partying, I partied so hard that I probably shouldn't have woken up the next morning. And I did, regardless. I woke up on the floor of my apartment. I didn't know how I got there. I didn't know where I was at before. I didn't know if I drove. I didn't know anything. I just remember feeling so terrified. And I was laying there and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And suddenly I felt this wave of energy, like this wave of light wash through my body. And right in that instant, I got up off the floor and I walked over to the mirror in my bathroom. And I looked myself dead in the eye and I said, Kat, you have the power to change your life. So why the fuck haven't you yet? And it was on that day that things actually started to completely turn around for me. It kind of felt like the prayers that I had been putting out there were starting to be answered. So I forced myself to go change, get on some tennis shoes to go for a little walk, little hike. And as I was headed out the door, I was on Instagram and I saw a post about a podcast called Badass Manifester. And if you know Badass Manifester, if you know Ashley Gordon, she's been on the podcast. I honestly thank her for kickstarting my intentional manifestation journey because I listened to her podcast that day as I was starting this walk, starting this hike. And everything in this podcast episode was resonating with me. Like I said, in the past, when I had heard about manifestation, I was like, fuck this. This is a bunch of bullshit. I don't know why people would believe it. They're so stupid. Haha. And then everything in this podcast was just resonating so deeply with me. And I was like, okay, I don't understand what this is, but I feel like I need to put all of my focus and all of my attention into implementing it into my life and really creating this beautiful, powerful change in my life. And I did exactly that. I, from that day moving forward, made the promise to myself that I was going to implement intentional manifestation into my life. Again, I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but I had absolutely nothing to lose because I had been in that state of hopelessness for quite some time. And I went all in about learning how to implement intentional manifestation into my life. And I started to see my life change so drastically, so quickly. And that was just from listening to podcasts. And through that, I started to ask the universe to send me more signs, more signals of what path I was supposed to take, what I was supposed to do. And through that, a manifestation coach showed up in my life. She actually no longer coaches. Otherwise, I would drop her in here and say that she's fucking badass. But she came into my life and I was like, okay, like this is interesting. I don't know that manifestation coaching is a thing. That's wild, so on and so forth. And ultimately my intuition continued to be like, no, this is something that you need to do. So I decided to invest in her. I had $200 in my bank account. I had no clue how I was going to pay rent the upcoming month. But my heart, my soul, my intuition knew that this is something that I needed to do. So I took the leap of faith. I maxed out my credit card in the process of it. I was scared shitless. But what happened because of that decision to invest in her and invest in myself by making that decision is absolutely life-changing. And through everything that I started to learn, I started to just share my story online, primarily over on my Instagram. And people were so interested in what I was sharing and were asking for my help. And so I started to just share with people different tips, tools, resources, have conversations, phone calls, Zoom calls with them. And they started to change their lives so drastically, so quickly from all the things that I was sharing with them. And I ultimately realized that I could also do this and step into this role of helping people through life coaching, helping people with manifestation. And so I made the decision to start my business. But before I made that decision, my parents actually came to visit me in October of 2019. And I told them that I was going to move back to Colorado. But when I moved back to Colorado, I would be making $10,000 a month and I would drive home in a white Audi Q5. My mom looked at me and said, yeah, Kitty, you got this. My dad looked at me and said, okay, like, good luck, girl. We'll see how that happens. But ultimately, like I said, I started my business in January 2020, and within 4 months of starting the business, I hit my first 10K month. I have never seen less than that since. I bought the Audi Q5. I rolled back to Colorado exactly how I said that I would, because that is the power of intentional manifestation. And from that point moving forward, I started to make a really, really big impact in the lives of other people. and was able to hit my first 6 figures within 10 months of starting the business. And this is the moment that I thought that all of my problems were going to go away, because growing up, we did not have a great upbringing surrounding money. I watched my parents struggle very intensely with money growing up. I feel really grateful to see them now in a much better position, but growing up, they lived paycheck to paycheck. There were times that they were super worried about money. And the idea of making $100,000 a year, I would look at other people's families and be like, oh, if only like my family made that kind of money, all of our problems would go away. Because other people's families, especially like the friends that I hung out with, it seemed like their families were so happy, so whole, so complete. And I equated that to money. So when I hit my first $100,000, I was like, sweet, all of my problems are going to go away. This is the magical moment that I have been waiting for. And little did I know that money wasn't going to do any of the things that I thought it was going to do for me internally. And this is where I learned that nothing external from me was ever going to give me the level of fulfillment that I thought it was going to, unless I was creating that for myself instead. I hit that first $100,000 and I felt exponentially worse than I did than when I was living paycheck to paycheck. And so this is where the real healing started for me. Once I had hit that first $100,000, once I had started the business, once all of those things had kind of fallen into place. And so I hired my life coach, who I ended up working with for every single week for 2 years. And we went deep into somatically healing from all of the trauma and all of the stagnant energy that I had held onto for so long. And it was the most transformative experience of my entire life. And within that time, I ended up paying off $70,000 worth of debt in less than 10 months. I moved to New York City. I launched the podcast for the first time. I quit drinking after a lifetime of depending on it to numb out. I traveled all around the world. I did it in style. I impacted more lives than I ever thought that I possibly could or would. I scaled my business to the place where I consistently make multiple 6 figures a year. I manifested my dream apartment in New York City against all odds. And man, oh man, y'all, that one was fucking crazy. I actually have a whole podcast episode on it. But in the process, I've also found the most supportive and beautiful community that I could ever ask for. And genuinely have never had a better relationship to myself, to God, the universe, source, spirit, whatever it is that you want to call it. And I genuinely have never been more grateful for life. And there's been so many other things that I've manifested along the way. But I also want to mention that during that time, I also had my heart broken by a gorgeous British man. I ended a 6-year-long toxic situationship that never panned out to be anything more than lots of fights and lots of really good sex. I went through a massive falling out with one of the most important people in my life, where we didn't talk to each other aside from a quick text message on birthdays and then on Christmas for almost 2 years. I had many mental breakdowns. I faced challenges in my business that I never thought that I would have to face and never thought that I would ever experience, and so much more. And the whole point in sharing these different things is that in the process of manifesting my dream life, where now today I am 28 years old. When I first started this journey, I was 23. I'm 28 years old. I'm living in New York City. I live in one of the coolest and most affluent areas of the city. I've built a life of freedom in my time, my location, my finances, my mind, my body, my soul. I have done things that I genuinely have never thought were possible within 80 years of living, let alone 28. And I couldn't be more grateful for it. But I share all of this because I wouldn't trade any of the good or any of the bad for the world. Because those not so fun moments, the not so pretty moments, the super uncomfortable, the heartbreaking, they have given me just as much richness. And that's something that we're going to talk about a lot on this podcast, is how it's not just about the abundance. It's not just about the money. It's not just about hitting those goals or setting those intentions or whatever it may be. It's also about the not so pretty things, because those are oftentimes overlooked, and those are oftentimes the things that actually bring us closer to who we are at our core, what we're here for in the first place, and the richness that our lives have to offer to us. And so in this new era, I am not going to break down the nitty-gritty of the rest of my story, because like I said, there's been a lot of things that have happened since, but in this new era, we're going to talk about it all. We're not just going to talk about how to manifest the beautiful and abundant things in your life. Of course, we're going to still talk about that. And of course, the better it gets, the better it gets. That's what this is all about. And that's what I'm here to help you with, is making a life that you are so genuinely happy with, you are so genuinely proud of, and feels so different than anything you've ever experienced in the past. But we're also going to be talking about how to meet those not so pretty things, meet those moments that feel heartbreaking or gross, the challenges, the uncomfortable, with just as much richness, because that's just life. You can't have one without the other, and I don't think we should want one without the other. I think it's truly okay to know that everything that you experience in this human experience is divinely meant for you, and that our souls are all just here living and experiencing what it is that we're meant to experience, to ultimately have, be, and do exactly what we want and what our souls incarnated for in the first place. So there you have it. That is my story. That is the vibe of what we're going to be creating here on the podcast moving forward. Like I said, it's all about richness. It's all about the wealth that you have in your life, not just in your bank account. It's time for us to redefine the standard of what wealth means, because wealth is so different than what we have been conditioned to believe that it is. Yes, we're making money here. Yes, we are going to manifest bigger, better, more abundant things than you could ever imagine. But we're also going to talk about every single aspect and facet of life, because that's what truly makes it holistically rich. So I'm so excited for us to be back together, moving towards getting richer and richer together in all aspects, from your finances to your relationships, experiences, travels, emotions, so on and so forth, because life is rad, and I am so grateful that I get to do it with y'all. So welcome back to the new era of the podcast. Let's fucking do this thing. I love you all so much, and I will chat with you on the next episode.